Hello, FPL managers! Welcome to the FPL Optimized podcast. This is our second season, and we're recording episode number 51 today. We reached a big milestone last week as we published the 50th episode, and we'll reach another milestone any minute now as we're on the verge of surpassing the 50,000 downloads mark. Pretty exciting stuff, and a big thanks to you for always tuning in. I am Bas, the casual manager, and my co host is Sertalp, the data scientist. If you're new to the podcast, this is the podcast in which we combine analytics with the good old eye test. Data or grass, or data and grass? That's the question, which we aim to answer on a weekly basis. I was away for a few weeks, but Sertalp kept going and recorded two new episodes in which he hosted FPL Spaceman and Formadillo as guest speakers. I enjoyed listening to those discussions. I hope you did as well. So, Sertal benefited from my absence by inviting more folks from the analytics camp, but as of today, I'll do my best to represent the grass side of things again. For the new season, we have reworked the format a bit, taking some learnings from last year. Sertal, would you like to talk about our plans a bit?
Yeah, of course, and welcome back to the pod. I was,
Thank you. I
it
missed
was lonely without you here.
it.
Yeah, so for this season's podcast plan, we will have a fixed content each week. Last season, we were mostly based on answering questions that we received from Twitter and Discord, but this season we have decided to go a little bit with a more like fixed content, and we will cover these topics. The first one will be accuracy of models. I think it's very important for the analytics side of analytics managers that
Yeah.
we have these prediction models or projection models, I should say, but
Mhm.
we don't know which ones are more accurate and for which positions, for which teams. Maybe there's a certain model that models a certain team particularly well, but not the others. So
Okay.
we will be investigating the accuracy of seven models: FPL Review, Michael Tokvam, Fantasy Football Hub, Fantasy Football Scott, Fantasy Football Fix, Draft Hunt, and FPL.team.
Mhm.
And if we come across another data source, we will try to add that too. But I think these are the major models, the commercial models available. And we will be reporting their mean absolute error and root mean squared error every week so that you will have a better understanding of which models are, well, more accurate and they're doing a better job. And the
Yeah.
second one will be the data source predictions for the next game week.
Yeah.
So we will try to split it by attack and defense, and it will serve as a fixture ticker, if you
Mhm.
will. Because normally when we check the fixture difficulty ratings from these, fancy tables from websites, I mean, they tell only part of the story. Now that we have lots of prediction model available, we can easily, take the average and see which teams are better to aim and which teams have maybe like better offense than their defense, or
Yeah.
if there are any dangerous fixtures that you need to be aware of. And the
Right.
third one will be the discrepancies is in prediction data. So we
Mm.
will try to report the players with the biggest variation among data sources. And you can think this as like, for example, sometimes FBI review says that Saka will get lots of points, but then
Right.
uh, maybe Fantasy Football Scott's model says that, that's not the case. I mean, he probably won't get that many points.
Yeah.
So there are usually players that models agree with. For example, every model says Haaland will get lots of points, but we will
Right.
try to unravel, which players that the models have the biggest difference among them, and we will try to focus on the players that is highly owned by the FPL managers.
Yeah.
And the fourth one will be ideal wildcard team. So we have been doing this over last season too, but this season we will be also using sensitivity analysis, starting from actually next episode. So we will run with sensitivity analysis to try to see, not we won't give you only a single squad, but we will talk about what's the best picks in terms of like goalkeepers, defenders, midfielders, and forwards, so
Yeah.
that you can actually try to find maybe the players that you can bring in.
Yeah.
And as always, we will try to answer questions, but we will try to keep the content or the length of the podcast pretty short every week. So we will try to get, lesser number of questions every week, or we will answer less number of questions every week, but we will try to keep them relevant.
Yeah. At least that's the ambition to keep it short. It won't be
Yeah,
easy, but also, yeah, of course, we want to make it easy to listen to. All
yeah.
right, well, that sounds like a good plan, and let's see how it will go. Of course, we'll stay agile,
Mm-hmm.
and your feedback or suggestions, dear listeners or viewers, will always be welcome. For today, we'll make a start already with that new concept. However, as we're still in a bit of a special period of the FPL season, as everyone is doing their tinkering for the first game week team, we also might cover a few other elements as well. So for today, we cannot say too much yet about the accuracy of the models, as we'll only be able to do that after game week one, once we have some actual data to compare to the predictions. However, Sertalp, I think it could be good if you remind everyone again which models exist and how you will be using them. And I think, yeah, you went over a list already just earlier, but anything you wanted to add maybe here?
Yeah, I just want to maybe, well, for especially for the new listeners, I would like to go over, what these prediction models are and what they are trying to do. So
Right.
essentially, what's happening is, well, everyone has their own way of doing this, but when you're talking with your buddies about the fantasy football in general, what you do
Yeah.
is you try to give a, strength, or you try to measure the strength of the teams. Like you look at the, latest results from, let's say, Newcastle United, and you say that, oh, their defense is really good, they keep getting clean sheets.
Yeah.
And so based on that, you are trying to predict that, or okay, they will have a game against a very weak opponent
Yeah.
offensively, so that there's a bigger chance of them getting another clean sheet, and then you bring more Newcastle United defenders, for example.
Yeah.
So essentially, that's what models are trying to do. The same thing. So they look at the past data and they try to measure how strong teams are based on which players are available, and injuries, or and these kind of things also affect, because
Yeah.
like even if the, let's say, Newcastle United defense is really good, if you know that their key defender is injured, you know that you can't really expect the same level of like clean sheets going forward. So models take all these things into consideration. They take uh, old performances, and not only the actual clean sheets, but also they check stuff like how many shoots they have conceded and how many of these shots were really big threats. And maybe they got a clean sheet because their opposition were really bad, they were not doing good defensively. So they look all of these, they try to predict what will happen in the next game. Obviously it is not a single prediction by itself, you give a probability. So for example, if you know that 100% that Manchester City will get a clean sheet next game,
Yeah.
you know that that's 6 points for the goalkeeper, and assume that there's no bonus. And if it is almost guaranteed that they will concede a goal, then you know
Yeah.
that the goalkeeper will get 2 points, that's certain, right?
Yeah.
But what if someone tells you that I simulated the game week repeatedly, and there's almost like a 10% chance of Manchester City getting a clean sheet? Then you actually multiply these probabilities with how many points they get if it happens, like 10% times 6 plus 90% times 2, and then you get, you find a value that's what we call expected value, and it is 2.4 in this case.
Yeah.
And 2.4, for example, is a very low expected value. I mean, you probably don't want to bring a player with that low of an expected value. And it also makes sense if I'm talking with you, if I say that, okay, I will bring a, Luton defender, and you will be saying that, well, they're not that good defensively. Like, are you sure they won't be getting clean sheets? That's the
Mhm.
whole meaning of the model. So
Yeah.
every model is using a different set of inputs, because I mean they are being modeled by different people. They are using different machine learning models, or what kind, whatever model they are using. So there are always differences between them. It's not like it's the Bible and you need to follow it to the letter. But
Right.
sometimes, I don't know, like maybe Mikkel is paying more attention to recent performances, but reviews model is based on underlying stats instead of actual
Right.
goals. Then they will arrive to different conclusions. Usually this, similar, but sometimes different. So that's
Yeah.
what we will try to, cover. So this is what the prediction models are, and that's why we are interested in the accuracy of them, and we will be trying to, take the average or ensemble them so that we will have a better idea.
Yeah. And it's actually great that you explained that because we often talk about review and Mikal Tokvam and Hub and Scout, and indeed maybe not everybody understood what that is or who those people are. So it's good that you went over it. And maybe
Mhm.
just for full clarity, so if you talk about a model and the prediction, so is this then this is not a person manually updating an Excel sheet, right? But this is really somebody who spent a lot of time developing formulas and models to make such kind of predictions.
I think every model starts with someone playing in a spreadsheet,
Right.
adjusting team values. Most people start that way. And
Right.
then they eventually realize that, okay, there's something else I need to add to my model. It gets, more and more complicated. And
Right.
eventually you arrive to a point that you probably need to, use a programming language to make it more automated.
Yeah.
And for example, FPL review has almost like an automated update every maybe hour or so.
Okay.
So when you're using the website, you might realize that, okay, a few hours ago it was predicting 8.5, expected value for Holland, and now it is
Yeah.
8.2. And you might be wondering what has changed. I mean, it's still the same, player. So what changes is, betting odds change as people, more people bet on, goal scoring probabilities and bets. So if a model is using that as an input, obviously you want to, rerun everything. I know that
Yeah.
Mikhail Tokman is pushing only a handful of updates every game week, maybe once or twice. If it is towards the double game week, period, he shares more updates. But
Okay.
his model, for example, is more like he does it. He checks if everything looks correct, and then he shares with his subscribers on Patreon. And
Right.
I know that Hub and Scott and Fix again, these are websites, so they are kind of more automated in a way.
Yeah.
And yeah, everyone is has a different way of doing this, but
Okay.
um,
All
yeah.
right. Well, cool.
So yeah,
Thanks for
but yeah,
explaining that.
usually it starts with a single person playing with the spreadsheet. You're
Yeah,
right.
yeah, of course. Yeah. Yeah, and this is then also, I think, a shout out to all those people because they spend a lot of time and they do a lot of work. And based on their work, we can also provide the analysis in this podcast.
Hmm.
All right. So with that being clarified, so I think we have a good understanding about the data we're using. Is there anything you can say already about what the data is telling us for the initial game weeks?
Okay, so I prepared a visual for this. Let me go over it. And for the people who are listening, I will be going over the values that we are also sharing in the video content. So I took four models, only four of them. I mentioned seven models previously, but I used only four of them because not every model is giving you an expected minute data. And expected minute is, sometimes useful to understand, if a model says that, Holland will get 8.2, like, do you assume that he will play the entire game or maybe part of the game? So that's kind of relevant. And I prepared the data. I checked the data for the average projected points per 90 minutes for every team, split by defense and offense. And
Mm-hmm.
I use these four data sources, I average them, and that's what we call an ensemble model. An
Mm-hmm.
ensemble model is good in terms of reducing the error because if there well, every model has some signal and some noise, and if they are using different kind of inputs, hopefully by taking their average, you are hoping to minimize the error too. And so again, going forward, we will be checking how accurate models are, and we'll adjust their weight. Uh, Pretty similar to how like 538 was doing for the political polls. So we will try to see which models are more accurate and adjust the weights. But for this game week one data, I just took the straight average of four models.
Yep.
And then I sorted the teams based on their strengths. So Manchester City is obviously the number one team, and their
Okay.
defense average across the horizon from game week 1 to game week 6 for defenders is 4.5 points. So for any player you're choosing from Manchester City, I mean, obviously some players, if they're more nailed, they will have a better chance of getting more points. But this is kind of like a fixture ticker for us.
Yeah.
So if
Okay.
you are getting a Manchester City defender in the long run, you can expect 4.5 expected value over the horizon, and for offense it is 5.5. So these two are the highest in the league. So
Yeah.
well, you will probably want to maximize the number of players from City, obviously, but their offense is better than their defense, almost around a 1.0 expected value, and that's usually the case for all the teams, because like you can lose your clean sheet only once, but you can score multiple goals. So offensive expected value is tend to be higher than defensive
Right.
expected value.
Yeah.
That's kind of why sometimes people don't want five defenders in their teams.
Mm.
Um, so I will go over some of the things that I have noticed here.
Okay.
Give me a second while I'm
Yeah.
pulling up my notes. Okay, so the first thing I noticed is so by the way, the order of the teams are Manchester City first, Arsenal comes second, and then we have Liverpool, Newcastle, Brighton, Manchester United, Chelsea, Tottenham, Brentford. And among these teams, the ones that I want to talk about are first of all Arsenal. I mean, they are the number two team here, and their only kind of dangerous fixture over this horizon is game week 4 against Manchester United at
Right.
home. So even though their defender average is 4.1 in terms of expected value, in this game it is 3.5. So it
Mm.
is a little bit, you know, I mean, it's not the worst expected value. We will cover some really bad ones in a second. But if
Yeah.
possible, maybe having a game week 4 coverage would be nice. And I see that for that game week, I mean, one of the best uh, defensive expected values by Chelsea, 4.3 against Nottingham Forest. So
Mm.
maybe you can consider having Arsenal defender only to be replaced by a Chelsea defender, or maybe you can have a Chelsea defender in your bench,
Right.
hopefully to replace it.
Yeah.
So that's one thing, and Liverpool is obviously, well, their defense is 4.0 over the whole horizon. I mean, it's obviously
Mm-hmm.
worse than City and Arsenal, but their offense is 4.6. Not the worst, but their
No.
second game week is especially good. I mean, everyone knows that the
Right.
Bournemouth game is good, but
Right.
mathematically and then numerically, if you are wondering, they are projected to get 4.7 expected value per defender and 5.2 points in
Mm.
offense. So midfielders and forwards. So, well, offensively, it's a really favorable fixture. But again, it is sandwiched between Chelsea game and Newcastle game where they have not so good expected value.
Right.
So I think most people are having this dilemma of going without the Liverpool players, and I think we will
Right.
talk about it in the
Yeah.
later. And yeah, I mean that fixture is really really good, really favorable. 5.2 is one of the highest values in this table in general,
Uh-huh.
and Newcastle defense is 3.8 and offense is 4.4
Mm.
in average, but they have two tough fixtures, and despite that, I mean, these are their values. So they have both Manchester City in game week 2, away, and Liverpool. Liverpool game is a little bit interesting if you compare it. Liverpool's defense rating in Newcastle game is 3.2 and offense is 3.9. But Newcastle's defense against Liverpool is 3.6 and offense is
Mm.
4.4. So they are better both
Right.
in defense and offense in that game. So
Yeah.
even though Liverpool fixture is difficult. If you just check a fixture ticker, probably you see a red color for this fixture. Models think that Newcastle has a good chance of, well, a better chance of keeping a clean sheet and also getting an
Yeah.
offensive return.
And that could
So
be maybe the difference in home advantage that's being included.
I think so. Yes, that's
Uh,
definitely affecting it.
uh,
And so yeah, Liverpool, and then comes the Brighton game. So for example, for the Brighton game, they're playing away game week 4, so their ratings drop a little bit from 3.6 to 3.3 for defenders, and from 4.4 to 4.1 for offensive players.
yeah.
But still, again, I mean, still not a bad fixture, and you will see that most of the solvers usually like having Newcastle defenders, and
Yeah.
certain models especially like them. Like some models just have triple Newcastle defense, like going from game week 4 after game week 4.
Right.
Um, so there's something funny here. So I mentioned the order is going like from Brighton, Newcastle, Brighton, and Manchester United.
Yeah.
So defensively, that's the order too. Newcastle has 3.8, Brighton has 3.6, and Manchester United has 3.4
Yeah.
expected value over the horizon for defenders.
Mm-hmm.
But offensively, the order is just reverse. It is
Uh,
4.4 for Newcastle, 4.6 for Brighton, and 4.8 for Manchester United. Just
right.
consider this. The difference between defense and offense of Manchester United is around 1.4 points. So you
Uh,
probably don't want to spend your um, Manchester United spots for defenders. And I'm saying this, but I know that lots of people want to have Manchester United's goalkeeper
yeah.
Onana. So
I
I
have
mean,
him.
so I'm checking it now, and they have two tough fixtures here. So the Tottenham game in game week 2, they're
Yeah.
projected to get 2.9 expected value defensively,
Mm-hmm.
and 2.6 points against Arsenal in game week 4 away.
Right.
So those two fixtures are critical. So if you have some kind of coverage for those two games, that's a smart thing to do. I will say, but
Hmm.
Manchester United's expected value gets better after this horizon ends. I mean,
Yeah.
after these two games. So one option is to wait until the game week 4 is over, and then we will know more about the team. Maybe their defensive ratings will go up.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, the tough fixtures will be over too, but also we will learn more about how good they are defensive this season. But
Yeah,
most
and I think that's
models,
also the thing with a goalkeeper, right? You don't want to change your goalkeeper, or you don't want to
yeah,
transfer him. So I think that's also why maybe people, yeah, they know about game week 2 and 4 with Tottenham and Arsenal, but on the longer term, I think they're comfortable to go with the United goalkeeper, also because of the price point.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Mm.
yeah. So the funny thing is here, Manchester United's fixture against Arsenal
Yeah,
defensively is 2.6,
yeah,
but Newcastle's fixture against Manchester City in game week 2 is 2.7. So Newcastle has a higher chance of having a clean sheet against Manchester City compared to
right,
Manchester United having a clean sheet against Arsenal. So that's why I
right.
was saying that okay, this team is playing against Manchester City. I'm not going to have a defender from Newcastle. Yes, but I mean Manchester United is not,
Yeah,
especially specifically, I should say. I mean, at this point, by the projection models, maybe they will update their
right.
values after friendlies
Yeah,
are over. But
yeah.
uh,
Well, that's a good point, especially I think for people who have cover on their bench, like you
yeah,
said. If you start with Onana and you also have a 4.5 million second goalkeeper, then of course you could consider switching.
yeah,
But I think most people will have a 5 million and a 4 million goalkeeper. So then, yeah, you just stick with your 5 million goalkeeper
yeah.
for that week. And,
So,
you hope for a clean
mm,
sheet or at least maybe some save points.
yeah. I mean, so again, for Manchester United's fixture here, I mean, they have 4.1 against Wolves. I mean, defensively, again, also 4.1 against Nottingham Forest. So that's why if you see a solver picking Onana, it will certainly pick a goalkeeper that it can rotate in game week 2 and 4. Like, I
Right.
don't think you will ever see a solver saying that, yeah, just get Onana and a 4 million, because you
Right.
will lose lots of expected value. Saying
Yeah.
that, I mean, maybe they will keep a clean sheet against Tottenham and Arsenal, and then you will, rack up the points. But I mean, probability, like from a probability point of view, it's
Yeah.
unlikely. So I mean, it's just better to be prepared. Maybe goalkeeper, yes, but if you if you're planning to have a defender, then you will certainly want to replace them.
Yeah.
Not certainly.
No, I
Again,
think it's great,
you're
and
free
it,
to do. Yeah.
this is, of course, very detailed level we're looking at, and I think that's, of course, also the advantage that analytics can bring, and I think that's also maybe the difference between analytical managers and grass managers, where, yeah, as you just described, you're looking at that Arsenal game with a very small chance of a clean sheet, and for you, it's a reason to go for another goalkeeper. While others might be thinking, more in general terms, thinking, all right, United is a good team. I'll count on them. So I think it's just a level of detail
Yeah.
we're looking
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
And I think from this chart, and we'll talk about it a bit later, it's also clear why people go for Ederson. There's always the
Yeah.
big debate, like why would you go for the premium goalkeeper? But I think from this chart, it's quite clear.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And yeah, one more interesting thing here is obviously Chelsea.
Yeah.
Their defense rating is better than United, Brighton, Newcastle, so it's 3.9 over this
Okay.
horizon. They are playing against Liverpool, yes, but then they have Luton in game week 3, and then uh, Nottingham Forest in game week 4, and their defensive ratings are 4.6 and 4.3 in these games. So their offense ratings are closer to their defense ratings for these fixtures too. It is like 4.7 against Luton and 4.6 against Nottingham Forest.
Yeah.
So as you see, like there's not much difference between defense and offense expected value when it comes to Chelsea. And in general, it is 3.9 versus 4.3. So I mean, compare this to Manchester United, where there was like 1.4 expected value difference between defenders and offensive players.
Right.
But for Chelsea, the gap is much smaller.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
so, and Brentford is interesting because they have a nice offensive fixture against Crystal Palace in game week 3. So it is 4.3. And then against Bournemouth, 4.5. And against Everton, 4.4 in game week 6. So the only problem there is game week 5 against Newcastle
Hmm.
away. So their defensive rating is really bad, but their offense rating is also like 3.5. Not the best. So again, some models suggest having Mubemo,
Right.
and I think often I see that he's either benched or like he's kept because I mean his price point makes sense in this fixture, but his expected value is lower than what you probably want. And
Yeah.
I mean obviously game week 5 is lots of weeks away, so that you might be able
Yeah.
to rotate players, transfer players, so that you don't need to actually make him play in this fixture. But yeah, just
Right.
something to keep in mind.
Okay.
And I mean, some of these teams are not that relevant for most people. I will talk about
Hmm.
Crystal Palace. In game week 4, they play against Wolves, 4.0 defensive rating, 4.2 offensive rating. That's a nice fixture. And then they play against Fulham in game week 6. Those two fixtures are not, bad actually. They're nice.
Right.
I mean, for their price point. And I know that some people are considering to have a Crystal Palace player.
Yeah.
And yeah, and one
Yeah.
of the
Just wanted, yeah, especially Eze. I think some people are talking about Eze, who had a pretty good finish last season, and
yeah,
also the preseason already did quite well. So that's somebody people are looking at. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So I already see him in some of the analytics managers drafts. But
Okay.
yeah, I'm not sure if I will have him, but yeah.
All right.
And
Okay.
one funny thing is, I mean, I was just while looking at this, I noticed that there's again 1.1 EV difference between Fulham's defense and offense, 2.8 defensive average and 3.9 offensive average. So Yeah, again, I
Hmm.
found it pretty interesting. So they are, for example, their expected value, defensive expected value against Manchester City in game week 4 is 1.9. So
Yeah.
you might be wondering, well, they get 2 points for just playing. So then this means that models predict Manchester City will score more than
More
two
goals.
goals,
Yeah.
probably. I mean,
Yeah.
they won't only lose their clean sheet, but they will probably also concede more
Yeah.
goals. So this table. I also shared it on Twitter. I will try to update it towards the deadline. But yeah, I mean it shows what models are thinking in terms of team strengths,
Yeah. No,
defensive
it's
and
super
offensive.
interesting. And yeah, we said we wanted to keep it short. I think we're not really succeeding.
It's
But
okay. It's the game week one
yeah,
discussion
game
happened.
week one is a new chart, and it's, as I said, it's quite detailed. Maybe for some people too detailed, but I think it also shows, yeah, the level of data we have available.
Hmm.
So if you're really into it, you can dive into it, like Sertalp was just doing. And I think an interesting observation when I look at Twitter and the drafts that people are sharing, a lot of people don't have Liverpool or Newcastle players, at least not for the game week one squad. Whereas if you look at the data from this chart, actually Liverpool and Newcastle are number 3 and 4 on the chart. So maybe we are overlooking those players. Could be.
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about not having Liverpool players. I mean, obviously, some people are, just fine with it. Most
Yeah,
people, I should say, and some analytics managers, they are kind of, considering to have Salah, for example,
yeah,
and sell him after game week 2 because I mean he's also a better
right.
captain for that game week.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about it. I mean, obviously he's the you know analytics pick among all the FPL
right.
assets in general, but yeah, I feel okay going without him to be honest.
Yeah, I think the thing is, and I was also mentioned in other podcasts, is that I think nobody is doubting the quality or the potential of those players, but you pay a premium, right? Salah, you pay 12.5 million, and for Trent, you pay 8 million.
Yeah,
And if you spread the funds, yeah, there are a lot of attractive players you can find as well for a lower price point. So yeah, you take a bet against Liverpool, or let's say you take a bet against Salah and Trent, but yeah, you're spreading the risk over multiple players.
yeah. I mean, especially Saka's price point,
Right,
it doesn't make any sense. I mean, he's too cheap for the projected
right,
points he has, or like
yeah,
quality he has. Maybe like for an eye test manager like you, I should say that he's really good and he's really cheap.
yeah,
So when we have an option like Saka, I mean that just makes sense to get him. And then yeah, as you mentioned, Salah is expensive too, and he only
uh,
has two. Well, game week 2 fixture is obviously really good, but beyond
right,
that, yeah, it's a question mark.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's why Saka, you mentioned him. I think he's the number two pick player now in the game.
Yeah.
55% ownership.
Hmm.
Behind Haaland with now 87%, which is of course
Yeah. I should also
crazy, but
yeah.
not so bad.
Yeah, I should also mention that Let's Talk FPL Andy,
Yeah,
he actually asked people to share their drafts, and I
right,
helped him to compile the ownership rates.
right.
And Saka, if I remember correctly, is owned over 90% of like drafts shared on Twitter.
Twitter.
So that 55% on FPL, most of the people are probably didn't change their team or they didn't
Uh,
care about it, but
yeah,
people who are engaged, his
right,
ownership is around 90%. It's
right.
crazy. I mean, it
Yeah,
just shows that I mean his price was not right.
yeah. So yeah, sorry to disappoint anyone who's listening and thought that they were unique with their Saka pick.
Well, no,
More
that
people
probably
have
wouldn't.
that idea. But that's also I have to say some people complain about that element of the game because yeah, there are a lot of popular picks. If, yeah, Haaland, Saka, there are a few others. But yeah, I think for the start of the season, it's you shouldn't be too worried. Just if you think it's a good player, go with it. Don't worry too much about the ownership. You just don't want to you don't want to fall behind too much at the start.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's great, Sertop. A very interesting new chart, and as you mentioned, we'll be looking at this every week to see how it evolves. as of
Hmm.
course also the data gets updated every week based on the results or based on other information. Yeah, you also mentioned that as there are different data providers, there could be discrepancies in the data. For example, yeah, you also said that one model could say that player X gets 3 points, while another model might say the player gets 8 points. So we want to kind of spot those players and take a look at that. I think for today it's maybe too early to do that, but I think from next week we can give that a try, right?
Yeah, I actually wrote the code for finding those players, but I wasn't able to generate the visual or the final table out of it.
Yeah.
I saw, if I remember correctly, De Bruyne was one of them, because his
Okay.
minutes are like going forward. Like we don't know how many minutes we can expect from him. Obviously,
Yeah.
his game week one expected minutes are low.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we will talk about those kind of players because it's it's valuable, because sometimes if you are using only a single projection model, or if you are just following one, you
Yeah.
might think that okay, De Bruyne is not a target for me, but
Yeah.
maybe he's being underestimated by a single model. How about what others are thinking? So we haven't prepared anything for this episode, but yes, starting from the next episode, hopefully we will have players to talk about.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we covered quite a lot already, but I think the main thing that everybody would like to know is how the optimal team looks
Yeah,
like for game week one. So let's cover that one next. Do you have an optimal team ready already?
I do. Let me
Okay,
bring it quickly.
okay, let's take a look.
So this is the um, team that's generated by model using these seven projection models. I took their average, so they're equally weighted at this point. But
Okay,
hopefully, as I mentioned, the weights will change start from next week. Um, so in goal again, we have a premium goalkeeper. Again, we have Ederson, and
yeah.
if I didn't see Ederson here, I was going to add him, like force include him, so that I can actually tease you a little bit. But I'm glad he just appeared on his own.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
And this season also, like we also mentioned in the last episode, I think he also has M at the end of his name. So he's
Right.
not only Ederson, but he's an upgraded version. So you definitely
Oh,
should get the premium goalkeeper, Bas.
it's a different goalkeeper. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we have Gabriel in defense and Estupinan, Ruben Diaz, Trippier. And in
Okay.
midfield, we have Odegaard, Saka, Mubemo, Bruno Fernandes, Rashford. And in
All
forward, we
right.
have Holland as the captain for the game week one. And in bench, we have Hennessy. Pinnock is the defender on bench, but he gets rotated with other defenders here, except Diaz. And Woodrow and Archer are other, that bench spots. This team is interesting
Yeah.
because when I was testing earlier, obviously it was getting both Holland and Jesus, and
Yeah.
so it had a different structure. But I think now everyone is considering a 4-5-1 formation because, yeah, I mean, the forwards they basically disappeared suddenly. So we had some options, but now Holland is looks like he's the only option. So most people, I think, will try to make 4-5-1 work unless we get new piece of information, obviously.
Yeah, and maybe just for people that didn't follow the news, so Jesus is injured, and the news is that he will be out for a few weeks. And I think also Nkunku, who was a popular option, or who was a popular option, is also now without. So I think that's why you said that we have more limited options in attack now, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And also, yeah, because maybe people are wondering why we're making fun about the Ederson pick, because this is also something that came up a lot last season. You know, Ederson is always shown by the score as the popular pick. But last year, City conceded a lot of goals, even though they were dominant. They managed to concede often in a game a silly goal. So that's why, yeah, Ederson as a premium pick was often not getting the points. But, you know, purely looking from the data And as we always say, also, with City and Pep Roulette, you never are sure who will be in the starting lineup in the defense, but you will always be sure that Ederson will play. So that's also that's kind of a secure way of getting the City points. Let's say, if
Yeah,
they don't concede.
yeah, exactly. Um, and
Okay.
so this is the no transfer, no scheduled transfer plan, and
Yeah.
so the good thing about this is it rotates players nicely in defense. It
Right.
doesn't make Gabriel play against Tottenham, Estupinan against Newcastle, and Trippier against Manchester City. Instead,
Okay.
it has Pinnock playing like covering for them in game week 2 against Fulham, game week 4 against Bournemouth, and game week 6 against Everton. So
All
this is
right.
kind of like a nice rotation is found by the
Yeah.
solver. But
Yeah.
again, the projection data will get updated so that this will likely change. But these kind of stuff I like. I mean, it makes sense from a fixture point of view.
Yeah.
Um, and then
Yeah,
I
that's
also
indeed.
yeah,
That's pretty neat. And what I also find interesting is that the solver picks Bruno and Rashford together. I did hear that being mentioned by some other managers. For example, I listen a lot to the FPL General, who's more of an eye test manager, and I think he also was going for Bruno and Rashford. So it's quite interesting that also now the data is proving that that could be a good option. Which maybe normally in previous seasons it's not something a lot of people would do, as these are two midfielders quite premium, but also yeah maybe yeah I don't know. I wanted to
mm,
say this year it's more affordable. I'm not sure if that's true actually. Actually, as Rashford got more expensive this year.
yeah. It's still I think they still make sense. I mean, I think
Yeah.
Fernandez like when we tried with sensitivity analysis, he was appearing in maybe over 90% of the optimal teams.
Okay.
So his price point for the expected value he brings to the team is pretty
Yeah.
good. So yeah, I mean Rashford is obviously his
Yeah.
projections are even higher
And the other
here.
one that's interesting is Saka with Odegaard. I think yeah we talked about Saka. I think that one is obvious, but I would say that most people now are talking about Martinelli. Maybe
Martinelli,
that's
yeah,
yeah that's about Odegaard. So
yeah,
it's interesting to see that the data has a preference for Odegaard, even though he's 500,000 more expensive also.
yeah. I think there's a small difference between the two. I mean, you can
Okay.
replace Odegaard with Martinelli here, and then probably get very decent expected value. Again, I
Yeah.
mean that's why I think the sensitivity analysis will make more sense for us to cover later,
Yeah. Okay.
because I mean it's not 100% clear that the Odegaard is the better pick here. It's just the model like prefers
Yeah.
if every like we put everything together, but probably with
Yeah.
a small margin.
And maybe it's also a safer option. I think Odegaard's minutes are probably more secure. That there is a bit more rotation risk now in the Arsenal side with some of the
Mm-hmm.
new signings. So yeah, maybe that could be one consideration. If you have 500,000 extra to spend, maybe you go for Odegaard above Martinelli.
Yeah, I'm checking, but yeah, I need to check it later. But
Okay.
yeah, there should be a small difference between the two. And let me talk about the team with the transfers allowed. So,
Okay.
well, if you just allow transfers like completely, it goes and makes like crazy transfers. I try to, control it a little bit by penalizing transfers. So, penalizing transfers mean that you're telling solver that if you are going to make a transfer, make it worth it. Like I don't want to pick a player just for a single game week and then sell him later, or maybe pick someone, play him in a single game week and then keep him on the bench. So then solver goes for only the transfers that it really thinks will make a difference.
Yeah.
And in this case, the team we have is Ederson in the goal again. Actually, I'm checking. It's the exact same team, I think. Yeah, it's the exact same team we have just discussed.
Yeah.
And for the 4 game week, it has the same team. And then in the fourth, like when you're going from game week 4 to game week 5, it
Right.
replaces Estupinan with Shar. And then in game week 7, it replaces Ruben Diaz with Botman. So that,
Okay.
as you see, it has triple Newcastle defenders, like we have mentioned about it.
Right.
But so
Right.
because they're XP for that game week 7, and game week 8 and beyond is good. And
Okay.
if you're just checking these numbers on YouTube version, you might be wondering, why game week 8 values are so high. I mean, so for example, Trippier has 16.53 expected value for game week 8. So I have been testing this new idea of adding future game weeks. Oops.
Oh, okay.
Future game weeks to the last game week of the horizon at a decade rate, so that the logic behind it is when you end the horizon, you will still have a good team for the long term, so that you
Right.
won't get stuck with a team that is maybe terrible in game week 9. So
Right.
that's why I add them to the game week 8 team.
Okay.
And the whole horizon, it keeps only Holland as a forward. Surprisingly, I was thinking that maybe it will bring another forward at one point,
Oh,
but
really?
yeah, only forward it brings is Watkins in game week 8,
Yeah.
um, like setting Woodrow, and it actually downgrades Odegaard for that purpose. Um, yeah, I mean that's
Okay.
probably a consideration, but
Hmm. Interesting. Because I started my game week 1, let's say, tinkering with a 4-4-5-1 formation, but then I quickly changed it. But maybe I need to
go
consider
back.
it again.
Okay.
Okay. But as you said, I think yeah, quite some things changed, and quite some things will change also over the next days, over the next week. Today, Jesus got injured, but maybe tomorrow there's something else happening, or maybe some new players are still coming in. So that makes it, of course, also difficult to already talk now about a final team. But at least we are sharing the information as we have it at the moment.
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, we had a question from FPL Gerald who wanted to hear about our processes for picking the game week 1 squad, and I think for you, Sertalp, you will base your picks on the data and on the solver as you just went through it, or are you also still making some kind of manual changes to anything?
Um, Last season, I was trying to play a little bit smarter, I should say. I mean, in my first season, I was just like, whatever the expected value is, I will try to maximize it with the solver, and I will pick the player probably suggested by the solver as the first pick, unless there is something weird going on. And so I think that was, in my first season, obviously at the beginning of the season I didn't know what I was doing, like chips transfers, it was a little bit confusing. My second season went really well. I finished around
Yeah,
3000, and I mostly followed the solver suggestions. And last
yeah,
season I tried to play smart. I think I
yeah,
made some choices against expected value whenever I think that, yeah, I think I know better than the model, and it didn't turn out well. And also some game weeks I was like, whenever there's a very small expected value difference between, let's say, Salah and Haaland, I was saying that, yeah, Salah is higher, I will captain him. That also didn't work well. So those kind of, like, few decisions defined my whole season. And so this season, I mean, especially at the beginning of game week 1, I don't want to schedule too many transfers, but at the same time, I want to keep my options open. One thing that I did well at the beginning of last season is keeping my third city spot open
yeah.
in case I need to buy Haaland. I kind of knew that it was a possibility that he will get more minutes than we were expecting, because we were trying to just estimate how many minutes he can get, and we were hoping that Pep will keep him on the bench as probably longer than other
Right.
players, but it didn't happen. So I had to uh, buy Holland. So I was able to do it because I had my third city spot open, and that's something I try to do. Like, I check the optimal team, but I don't think, okay, this is optimal. I maximize my expected value. This is it. I try to play with injuries. Like, what happens if I need to replace this player? What happens if I need to replace this player? And that is a little bit complicated. And there is not a, I should say, like a very scientific method behind it. You just try to, obviously, you try to maximize again expected value, but you need to be aware. You need to test it. You need to bend the player, run the solver again, see how much expected value you are losing, and usually it's time consuming. So
Yeah.
in order to do it, what I do is I run sensitivity analysis for, let's say, 50 times. I try to check which players appear regardless of what happens. Like Fernandez was one of them. I will repeat the tests, obviously, but
Yeah.
those players I like immediately because you know that there's no chance that there is another expected value optimal team without them in it. So I just lock them. It also makes solver go faster. Then after I lock a few players, maybe like six of them, then I run longer solves by randomly changing data. Like randomly changing data. By that I mean I I assume that a player gets injured in game week 2 randomly. What happens in this case? What happens in this case? And then I generate lots of scenarios with it. I run all of them and try to see again what's common. So it is kind of like an iterative approach for me. I make a
Yeah.
few iterations, lock some players, make more few iterations, and in this case, for example, I also allow transfers. So there is a chance that I will start with Salah, for example, and then sell him game after game week 2.
Right.
It's possible. But then again, I need to see how he plays with other players I have locked into my team. And
Yeah.
if picking him is making me lose expected value, then yeah, I won't. But that's pretty much the process. I mean, it's a very complicated. It's unfortunately not like I click the solve button and then it gave me the team and then I used it. But it
Yeah.
takes a few more iterations than that.
There's more to it. So if
Yeah.
people
How
think,
about how about
yeah.
you, boss? How do you choose your team?
No, I just wanted to say, if people think it's easy the way you do it, it's not the case, and there's a lot of
Yeah.
time go and a lot of thoughts into it. But indeed, I'm completely different. Maybe also for the new listeners, we mentioned it at the beginning. So Sertalp is the data scientist. He looks at the data. I'm more the casual manager. Maybe a lot of people listening can relate to it. I play football myself. I watch games, so I think I know a lot. But as previous seasons have shown, Sertalp managed to beat me in this game. But
Three times already, right? But
was it? I think was it 2 times or 3 times? Anyway,
I think 3 times. Should be three.
I'm looking forward. So
You're looking
you know,
for.
I'm looking forward to this season. I definitely take in information. I'm on Twitter. I look what other people are sharing. I look at some of the data, but mostly based on this podcast, looking at what Sertalp has prepared. I'm not going into FPL review or other data sources myself. And most of my picks, more it's based on gut feeling, I would say. So that's also where the contrast in this podcast is coming from. So just my process this year. I try to not think about it too much. I think that was a mistake I made last year. Last year I was really excited. Also, I think because we just started the podcast, so I spent almost all summer thinking about FPL, making daily changes, and when we were at game week 1, I was already quite tired of it. So
Oh,
I didn't want to make that mistake again. So what
taking
I
it
did
easy
this
this time.
year, yeah, what I did this year, I made a first draft, and then yeah, I did consume some content, not too much. I'm starting to build it up now, the content consumption. I'm also now making let's say more frequent changes. But as mentioned earlier, it's still in a way a little bit useless because so much can still change, right? Injuries, new players can come in, but yeah, it's good to already have some ideas in mind. So
But yeah,
as
if
I
if
said,
the if it was the deadline today, is
right.
this going to be your team? Okay.
Yeah, or, we can definitely look at it. I can talk through it, and this is the team that I changed today as the Jesus injury came in. Actually, this morning I still had three attackers with Jesus, Nkunku, and Haaland. But in my latest draft, I changed it. So what I'm playing with at the moment, or what I'm thinking to play with, is Onana in goal. I know Onana from his Ajax days, so I watched him quite a lot. He's a very exciting goalkeeper, so I think it's an interesting option. Estupinian and Chilwell Gabriel in the back. Then midfield Foden, Saka, Mitoma, Rashford, Martinelli, and then in front Haaland and João Pedro. And I have two playing bench options with Watkins and Pau from the new Villa defender. And then I also have one cheap defender, 4 million, who's not really supposed to come on, but with two playing bench players, I should have enough flexibility. So yeah, so as I said, I had Nkunku and Jesus in my team. I was aiming to go with either 3-4-3 or 3-5-2. But after the injury news today, I decided first to switch to Watkins. That's the same price. And Nkunku, I still need to think about it. I moved him out, but he might still be okay for game week one. So I could go back to him. I could also go for Jackson at Chelsea, who also looked pretty interesting so far. But in the draft I just went through, I decided to go for João Pedro. To be honest, I don't know him that well, but I did see some reports about him. It looks promising. He's quite cheap, and that allowed me then to upgrade Mbomo to Martinelli. So I needed to find the third Arsenal asset,
Hmm.
uh, and at the moment it's Martinelli. And I also went from Ake to Chilwell for 500,000 more. Because on the one hand, I wanted a City defender. We talked about it earlier.
Yeah.
City has a good run of fixtures, and their defense is probably the best in the league. But on the other hand, yeah, there is Pep Roulette, so it can always drive us a bit crazy. And I think Chelsea they've been looking good in preseason. Also, Chilwell has been looking good, so I'm quite happy to start with him and then to see how it goes. Some other players that I still have in my mind, Darwin Nunez could be interesting, but also for Liverpool, a
Yeah.
lot of rotation doubts. But he could be interesting maybe instead of Watkins. Odegaard instead of Martinelli, but I would need to find that 500,000 somewhere. And yeah, I'm also quite okay to stick to Martinelli. So yeah, that's where I am at the moment. Not final, but yeah, I would be quite happy to go with this team. I think I have some picks that are seen, let's say, in also in the template teams, but I also think I have a few different ones, maybe with Foden, starting with Chilwell, which not everybody will do, maybe. Yeah, just a few. And I also want to play a little bit safe. Like last year, I went against Haaland, and that kind of ruined my season right at the start. So this year, I want to go a little bit safer from the start. Try to start, try to keep up with the field, sort of say, and then see later on what changes I'll make.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's very, very template. I mean, even like
Yeah,
Fodon and Chilwell, I think in the Andy's video or work, I should say, he's picked by around 50% of the like all submissions,
yeah,
and
already.
most of the
Okay.
people have him in their bench though. I think
Yeah.
it's like 28% of them have him their bench, 22% have him in their
Yeah,
lineup. So I
they
think
start against Liverpool, so that's why maybe people put him on the bench. But I think on
yeah,
the other hand, if you have Chilwell in your team, you can always score points. And I'm not too convinced about Liverpool. I hope they prove me wrong because I like Klopp, I like Virgil, I like Liverpool, but I still have some doubts over how they will do this season. So I don't mind to bet against them in the first game. I had the same idea with Nkunku. I think Liverpool will concede. So I didn't mind that first game against Liverpool for Chelsea.
yeah. I mean it's a pretty good team.
Yeah, yeah, as you said, maybe it's quite template, but yeah, I don't want to be too different also. But uh, I think which is a bit strange, and we talked about it already earlier, is that I have zero Liverpool, and I think a lot of other teams also have zero Liverpool, and that's really different compared to other years, right? Other years it was
Yeah.
always like, okay, which three Liverpool players do you pick? And now we see a lot of teams with zero Liverpool. And I think you're a Liverpool fan, right, Sertalp? So how are you feeling about this going without Liverpool potentially?
Yeah, from that perspective, it feels weird to be completely honest. I mean, I'm upset that I don't have, Alexander Arnold or Salah in my team.
Yeah,
But yeah, I also, understand that the fixtures are not favorable, or maybe team, doesn't have that much expected value to justify their price tag.
yeah,
I'm okay with that, having any
right.
Liverpool players. I mean, if I had like three Everton players and no Liverpool players, that could have been pretty weird. But yeah, my
Yeah,
team is pretty nice, I think.
yeah. All right. Okay. Good to know. Yeah, and as we said before, I think it could make sense to spread the funds. But let's see. Salah always was doing well in game week one, so he could punish all of us. He could score a hat trick, and then
Yeah,
we want to jump back on him for the game week two fixture.
yeah,
That,
yeah,
that that could happen. Let's see.
certainly.
All right. We spoke about many different things already. Maybe we did speak also about the goalkeeper position.
Hmm.
As I said, I think we always see that the solver likes to go with a premium option. Often it's Ederson. He's now priced at 5.5 million. But there's also a lot of managers also on Twitter that always say that they don't want to spend more than 4.5. So
Yeah.
they just want to go for cheap, the cheap goalkeeper option. So maybe do you want to explain again why, from an optimal perspective, a premium goalkeeper is often preferred?
Yeah, premium goalkeepers are preferred by solvers, usually because of the expected value. I mean, it's high enough that it justifies the price tag. I mean,
Right.
even if you check the expected value per 1 million ratio, you often see them at the top. And
Yeah.
there's usually not enough, you know, reasons to have that extra, like if you're picking up, goalkeeper for 5 million instead of 5.5. I mean, that 0.5 million, what are you doing with it? Like, which player
Yeah.
are you upgrading?
Yeah.
So, most of the time, since because of the prices are a little bit weird, like you are able to log a very good midfield and good defenders, even good forwards, and still have some money left. I mean, you can
Yeah.
obviously upgrade some of them, but it doesn't make enough difference as much as the goalkeeper does. And Ederson, I mean, last season was a little bit unlucky, but in the seasons before that, I mean, Ederson was
Yeah.
able to get lots of points. And
Yeah.
even like just checking by the, historical data, you might be saying that, well, I will get Ederson and just, don't think about it. He's like a meme at this point. People are like,
Yeah.
no, no way,
No.
Ederson.
No.
And he conceded from a very low XG shots, which is
Yeah.
annoying. Which was annoying when I had him, and I can imagine that it still frustrates people.
Yeah.
But yeah, premium goalkeepers are often preferred because of that. But again, losing clean sheet is so easy. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
one goal and then you lose it. So variance for the goalkeepers is a little bit high because I mean they're obviously either getting 2 or 6, but I mean depending on the clean sheet percentage, it could be anywhere in between. And also some goalkeepers also get save points, some goalkeepers get bonus points. So when you have a premium goalkeeper who doesn't get too many shots, that you're
Yeah.
not getting extra points, the best chance you're getting a clean sheet unless he
Yeah.
concedes from a low XG shot.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, there's this 4.5 million goalkeeper or 5 million goalkeeper who is getting lots of bonus points, getting lots of, save points from the
Good
shots he
point.
receives. So obviously there are always better goalkeepers for cheaper price. I mean, there's no question about it. The question is, are you able to identify them before it happens?
Right.
And I mean, data says that Manchester City has a good defense, so they will likely to keep a clean sheet compared to other teams. That's why Ederson is optimal.
Yeah.
Again, I mean, if you're using a solver, you can easily say that I don't want a premium goalkeeper. What's the best? That's also possible, and lots
Yeah.
of people do it too. But yeah, I mean, premium goalkeepers often appear as the optimal because of it. I don't think that there's anything wrong with it, but people get quite funny
Yeah.
when they hear it. But yeah,
It's good that you explained it again. And I had Ederson for a few weeks last season, and indeed he conceded. So then you're like, okay, why am I paying a premium if they concede anyway? But that maybe was an outlier, especially I think if we look at the fixtures for City this at the start of the season.
yeah.
We should keep an open mind. And while discussing this, I'm rethinking my my plan because originally before I had Ake, so I did have a City defender, but now I moved into Chilwell, so maybe you
Yeah,
know maybe I don't have enough City coverage now. But yeah, I'll see. As you said, from Onana to Ederson is just 500,000, so maybe I can find it somewhere. I did look at the 4.5 million goalkeepers. Honestly, I'm not too interested
convinced.
by the options at the moment. As you say, maybe there could be somebody who will prove us wrong, and then we can still go there for, let's say, the wild card or earlier on for a swap. Something that happened today, I don't know if it's confirmed, but it seems that Sanchez is going from Brighton to Chelsea. So
Yeah, I saw that.
I assume he will be the backup for Kepa, but maybe something to keep an eye on. He's 4.5 million. If by surprise he turns out to be now the number one goalkeeper, then that could be a very interesting option, of course.
Yeah.
Personally, I also like Verbruggen at Brighton, but that's maybe because he's Dutch, like me. But he's a very promising young goalkeeper. He was in the goal for Anderlecht in Belgium here last season, and he impressed many people. I think that's also why Brighton bought him. So I don't know. He's still quite young. I think he's 20 years old. So I don't know if he will go into the goal right away. I think for the moment it looks like Steele will still have to spot. But keep an eye on Verbrugge because he's really talented. All right, maybe still something related to the goalkeepers to finish with is that goalkeepers and defense in general is that we saw an announcement from the Premier League that they are planning to add more time. Something that we also saw at the World Cup, that the time lost, for example, for goal celebrations or for free kicks or penalties is
Yeah.
being added. So what we could see is that like 8 or 9 minutes get added each half. And I think some people are already tweeting about it, saying, "Well, if there's more time to play football, then it's also there's more time to score a goal." So maybe this reduces the likeliness of clean sheets and therefore makes the expected value of defenders less. So is this something you already seen, or is this something you already been discussing, Sertop, or is it too early?
Yeah, you mentioned this to me, and it makes sense intuitively. If you assume that the game goes on an infinite amount of time,
Yeah,
there's a probability of one that they will, concede a goal at the one
right.
point, regardless of which team it is. So 9 minutes added is a, serious. It might have serious impacts on
Yeah,
how many minutes ball is in the play, and so, well, obviously clean sheet probabilities will go down unless they have considered it already. If I remember correctly, review said something about it, and he changed the minute range to like 90 minutes to 95 minutes, so that more, like, you have better control over how many minutes people are
yeah,
playing, and then you can calculate the probability of getting a clean sheet better, or I should say the expected value. I don't think every model has done it already, because some of these models came out before this change was
yeah,
this change happened. Yes, but definitely yes. The
yeah.
expected value for defenders and goalkeepers should go down as a result of it. But how much? I think that will be also obvious after the league starts. I mean, Premier
Yeah.
League saying that, yeah, I mean, we will add more minutes, but
Yeah.
are the referees gonna actually do it? I mean, in the World Cup,
Yeah.
it was interesting, as you mentioned.
Yeah, we'll see. And maybe, what you also often see is that then they pay a lot of attention to it during the start of the season, and then during the season it fades away again.
Yeah, it
So
happens.
let's see how this will work out. It's an interesting concept because I think if you look at, I don't remember the stats exactly, but I think it's something like 55 or 60 minutes is what the net playing time often is. So, out of a 90 minutes game, If you look at the time that actually the teams are playing football, it's just 60 minutes, let's say, and the rest of the time, yeah, either the ball is out of play or there's an injury or people are waiting. So yeah, that's something that has been talked about more in the past. Like how can we make the game more attractive? Like how can we make sure that the net playing time increases? And this is of course one way to do it to add more
Yeah.
extra time.
Then I mean,
So yeah,
if
let's see how that will
yeah,
if that will happen and what the impact will be. So it's something
yeah.
definitely to keep an eye on.
I mean, sounds like game time will increase around 10%. If I understand
Yeah,
correctly, almost at most, I should say 5 to ten
no, it could be
percent.
even more, because it's for each half. So it
Yeah,
can
yeah,
if
yeah.
you yeah
Oh, each half. You're right.
yeah yeah
Each half.
yeah. So it
Yeah.
could be like
Then yeah. I mean, then
almost 20%.
20%.
Yeah
So yeah, then it should have a very significant, like visible impact on the
yeah
players and expected values. So if it
yeah
so if the expected value for defenders doesn't drop sharply, and like suppose this is being implemented, like referees are actually going with this, adding like
yeah
8 minutes at the end of each half.
yeah
If expected value for defenders are not going down, then we know that there's a lazy person behind the model who forgot to update the
yeah
values. I mean,
yeah
I expect them to go down, and they're not.
yeah.
I mean, we talked about it, but defender expected value is already low, and if it goes down a little bit more, yeah, I mean, maybe three defender setups will be more popular, just like you
Okay
have.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's keep an eye on it. We will definitely do that. As we said at the beginning, we will look at the data and we will give you the weekly updates on how the data is changing. So this is one element we can keep an eye on.
Hmm.
All right, I think this ends this podcast. We hope you enjoyed the new format. We didn't use, let's say, the shorter format, but we did use some of the new charts. So that was, I think, already good to take a look at and to give a kind of a teaser. Sertalp, anything you still want to add before we close it?
Yeah, I want to mention two things. The first one is our Discord server. We have an FPL Analytics Discord server that I have been running for a while now, and um, people in this server are, you know, interested in analytics. Obviously, some of
Yeah,
them do analytics for a living, or they use analytics already for FPL. There are people who are interested in learning about analytics, so we welcome all. We try to teach each other and help each other, so it's a very, I should say, better place than Twitter is. So if you have been bothered by the recent changes by Elon Musk and looking for a place to you know to migrate, I mean, our Discord server is really nice.
okay.
And the second thing is our podcast mini league. So Bas actually asked about it, and he said, like, why don't we have a mini league for the podcast? And I said, I don't know. Maybe we should. And we created a mini league, and the code, I will post it below the both the YouTube version and also the podcast description. But the
Yeah,
code is 0JSDLA,
yeah,
and we have more than 50 teams in it already. We would like to see you too. I mean, if you're enjoying the pods, and we will keep an eye on it, and we will try to give shots to whoever is leading the league, and also maybe we can also even check the ownership rates from this league to see if people are really paying attention to the podcast or
yeah.
not. So
Right.
no, I'm just kidding, but yeah. So we have a mini league now. Yay!
Okay, cool. Yeah, and actually the idea came from Greg Andrews Burner, who is a frequent listener and also often sends in his questions on Twitter. So, Greg, if you're listening, thanks for suggesting that idea. We took immediate action and created the mini league. So we hope that we'll see you there as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
All right. Well, this was FPL Optimized Podcast, episode number 51. Thanks for listening, everyone. We will be back again with another podcast next week ahead of the game week one deadline. And of course, we'll look at the latest data then and also talk about our updated drafts. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast so you will get notified when the next episode is released. And do follow us on Twitter, or as it's now called, X. For Sertalp, it's at Sertalp Bilal, and for me, it's at Belfi BB. And as of this season, you can also find us on YouTube. So hope to see you there as well. All right, until next time, stay curious and stay analytical. Bye bye.